I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to just sleep and just like, I was just in this really dark place. So if people did reach out, I didn't answer. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. But I would have loved someone to be persistent enough to be like, I'm going to check on you every day. And you don't have to answer, but I want you to know I'm there. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the very best version of yourself. And today we are back with another episode. One that I'm always really excited to do this, so I feel like I say that all the time. But I'm excited for this episode because May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month, and our episode ties into that, something I'm very passionate about. So yeah, I'm very excited to get into it. But before we get into it, how are you feeling today, Cesar?
Pretty good.
Got a fresh new cut.
Yeah, fresh new haircut. It's been a month.
Yeah, Cesar's hair grows like
it grows
so fast.
It does. It's annoying.
I would love to beat him because I'm on my own hair growth journey.
I think there's a limit. When I was in high school, I tried growing my hair out. And like there was a certain limit that it would grow, and then it just kind of stopped.
Well, when you use 2-in-1 shampoo, yeah, there's a limit. So, yeah. Red flag. I'm just kidding. But before we also get into the episode, I want to do something new to just recap our weeks. And something I did in college, which I actually really love because it makes you think about, how you're feeling every week, is highs and lows. So, like, what was your high for the week, and what was your low?
I'll have to think about that. Hold on. I should probably do this every week. That's actually a good.
Well, I'll go first. Yeah. So I'll let you marinate on that. My high was the spaghetti night with Kat and her boyfriend Elijah. We've made friends in our new apartment complex. In Nashville in general, actually, and went over there for spaghetti night, which was fun. She cooked for us, and then we had like a little like game session of playing. I think it was called Buzzed.
That was called one was called Buzzed. The other one was called Taboo or something like that.
Oh yeah, we played Taboo like after like midnight edition. It was pretty fun. It's just nice to spend like good quality time with people. So I really enjoyed that. I also really enjoyed, so like I guess two of my highs is going to Barnes and Nobles to get more books. I felt like how I did when I was a kid because I used to love going to the bookstore, and I feel like when you get older, there's just not as much time to read for enjoyment. I definitely feel like I didn't have time in college, and even like over the past 2 years, it's been hard. But one of my goals like last year, which I succeeded on, and one of my goals this year was to read more books and read more for enjoyment. So I've been reading a lot of fiction books, which is fun, but going to Barnes & Noble is just so, it's like heaven. So that was nice. And then my low probably is just, I think like when you're starting a new job, which I've only been at my current job and current role for a month now, it can be very intimidating, and a lot of days you can like kind of doubt yourself and kind of feel, I don't know, good enough to do well, even if that's not true, because it's not true. I know that I can do the role that I'm currently in. It's just that like imposter syndrome of like maybe I'm not good at anything. So that's kind of what I was combating this week.
I mean, I would say honestly, on my high this week was hanging out with our friends. It's always awesome to get out of the house and like after like a long week of work.
Yesterday, what did we do? We saw.
Oh yeah, we saw him. Oh wait, yeah. Then we went to go watch. Very point. I'm just blanking out. I don't know what's going on here.
I don't remember anything.
Yeah, goldfish memory right now. No, it's just whenever I'm put on the spot like that, I'm like, wait, what? We went to go see Fast X and our Fast 10.
Yeah, Fast 10.
And it was interesting to say the least. Family. Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. Not my top Fast and Furious movie, but I can see where they're going with.
I guess it's supposed to be. Yeah. Noah told me it's supposed to be 2 or 3 parts.
Yeah, 2 or possibly 3. I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's just no resolution. Like usually at the end of like all of the movies, you know that there's gonna be a continuation, but there's some like resolve of like like you at least know this person's okay, and I feel like they were all separated at the end.
Spoiler alert, by the way. Spoiler alert.
They were all separated at the end, so like you feel like you don't get that like comfort of like knowing anything's okay.
Yeah, it's just a lot of spoiler alert. There was a lot of cliffhangers Yeah, to say the least. And it wasn't my favorite thing.
So what was your low?
My low,
the fact that there were a lot of cliffhangers.
One of my uncles passed away. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I was this week's been crazy now.
It's been a crazy week, yeah. Rest in peace. He was going through a lot throughout his. He was only like 40 years old,
He was young, yeah.
Yeah, he had cancer. Obviously, came out of that, but we weren't sure if he had it again. He just got really sick, and then he passed away. Yeah, so that's my low.
But the highlight of that is that he's now in heaven
with he's in a better place.
And your Tioan. Yeah. So, and he's not in pain anymore.
Yeah.
So I know it's always hard to lose someone, especially because I know me and Cesar have been able to go to Mexico to really spend time with his family there. So, but I'm glad he's out of pain because it's hard to watch someone suffer like that.
Yeah, that is, man. But yeah. That's been our week.
Yeah, so that's the highs and lows. Maybe should have started with the lows so we end on a. But yeah, so today's episode, I wanted to talk about, like I mentioned, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I personally have struggled a lot with my mental health over the past 3 years, and so this is something really important to me. And I think that one of the things I never felt. I want to preface this by saying I have great friends, I have great family, but I think a lot of people don't know how to support their loved ones or their friends when they're struggling with their mental health. So the topic of today's episode is how to create that safe space for your friends who are struggling with their mental health, and how you can support them when they're in that kind of need.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Any thoughts or just?
Yeah. I know we've talked briefly about mental health on a couple of podcasts by now, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously we're coming towards the end of May, so better late than never to obviously talk about this subject and see how we can all grow.
I think we've talked about anxiety and depression in their own episodes, but I'm not sure we provided as many actionable steps as we could have. And I just think that this is something that we often get wrong, and I don't think it's necessarily people's fault. I think it is, not being as informed as you could be and just not knowing how to support your friends, because often when someone is struggling, they might not go to you. So kind of my first thing is from experiences, what I wished people would have done when I was struggling and when I was in a dark place is to reach out, and not just reach out once. And my thing was that I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to just sleep and I was just in this really dark place. So if people did reach out, I didn't answer. And I was embarrassed, I was ashamed, but I would have loved someone to be persistent enough to be I'm going to check on you every day, and you don't have to answer, but I want you to know I'm there. And I think that's such an important message to send to your friends who are struggling, because even if they don't answer, it does not mean they don't need you. It does not mean that they don't want to know that they have a support system, because that's kind of how I felt. Is I had a couple people reach out once, but I wish they would have tried to get through to me a little bit more. I wish they would have just continued to make their presence known, because I feel like even that can make all the difference.
Yeah. I think we tend to, everyone obviously has different life journeys and a lot of things going on within our own lives. So I think we can all feel like we maybe didn't reach out to somebody who we should have reached out to. Yeah. I know that's the fact for me. So learning from that, understanding that there's someone's going through possibly going to be going through some kind of issue, you just don't know because you haven't reached out.
Yeah. And so that's also why I kind of brought up this message, because I was there were so many things I wanted people to do, but I also wasn't in that position to tell you, this is how you need to love me, this is how you need to support me. Because it also kind of feels and this is more just me, it kind of feels you just wish people knew how to do it. You don't want to have to explain how someone should take care of you. You should just want them to kind of try. But before we get into some more reasons, I think there's the first indicator is kind of signs that someone is struggling with their mental health. What do you think would be some signs?
like let's say it's someone you work with,
Yeah.
like not taking care of themselves, like things like that, and you notice something different about them, maybe their hair, I don't know, like things like that, like maybe hygiene could be a thing too, and
Yeah.
maybe they're just being distant,
Yeah.
things like that. That's the first thing
Something
that comes
that's
to my mind.
not normal, their normal like typical
Yeah.
behavior. Yeah, so some of the signs, this is from like the Jed Foundation, is changes in behavior, like they're not acting like themselves, and changes in appearance. So like they might not be taking care of yourself. So one of like the things of like when you're depressed is like you can't even like get yourself up to like shower, and people like people think that that's so like odd, like, oh, you can't even shower. It's like, no, like you literally have no motivation to do anything. Like you just don't want to, you can't feel the need to even take care of yourself. Sometimes you don't want to eat, you don't want to. So yeah, changes in appearance, changes in mood are frequently like kind of one of those key indicators. And changes in like maybe like what they say and how they present themselves. So you might be used to like them being a cheery, super happy person. And they might like present themselves in a different way that doesn't match what you're used to from them. And then, yeah, it kind of changes in what they post online. Or like in my case, don't post online. You just kind of distance yourself, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because social media can be toxic anyway. But I think it's important that we look out to see like if you're noticing kind of a negative change in your friend, of you should ask, like, hey, is everything okay? And I think people often don't want to ask because they feel like, oh, that's none of my business. And maybe it's not, but, like, if they want to talk about it, let them. And if they don't make them, but let them know, like, hey, well, if you ever do, I'm here. And I think that's often something that people might be, like, scared to do.
I would say maybe it's just they don't know how to approach someone and talk to them about it. I would say it's not that
I feel like they feel like they're
scared.
overstepping sometimes.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to put the burden on someone else. That's like a common thing that people say. Like, I don't want to burden you with my,
Well, I'm talking about someone going up to someone else who's struggling, not the
my
person
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, maybe they don't know what the right thing to say, or maybe it starts with just asking them how they're doing. But then again, the person that is going to be responding to that question could just, not say what they're actually feeling and how.
It's funny because that's so like true though, because whenever someone asks like, oh, how are you? I'm like, you don't really want to know. You just and like if I say like, hey, I'm actually doing really freaking awful, it's like I would feel awful putting someone else in that position to like, well, I wasn't expecting that, so what do I say now?
Yeah.
So it gets into that position, like, do I tell them how I'm feeling? Because are they asking honestly and genuinely? Or, like, is it just that, like, chit-chat, like, how you doing today? Oh, I'm doing good,
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all done this, I would say we've probably all done this. And there's a deeper reason why we do that, someone tells us, hey, how are you doing? Or how was your week? Or whatever it was. And there's, like, let's say there's, like, a bunch of stuff going on in your life. It's, I don't know.
I think it's that we don't want, like, there's a certain level of vulnerability you share with certain people. So in the workplace, I almost feel like vulnerability is not something you have in a lot of workplaces. Yeah. I do think there are companies changing the way that they approach that, being able to really share, like, what's going on and, like, what may be impacting your work, And I think that there's a beauty in being able to share that stuff in the workplace too, because our lives, especially if you work from home, our lives are so intertwined with what we do for work. We're at work all the time, so to separate like what happens at home and what happens at work is kind of a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So in the workplace, it's a little bit harder to be vulnerable. So if someone came up to you and like was like, "How you doing?" It's like, well, also depends on how close you are to that person. If it's a stranger, you might not feel compelled to share, or maybe some people might feel more compelled because it's like, this is just someone who doesn't really know me, and it's kind of easy to share. But with people that sometimes with people that know you, it's even harder to admit because they see you a certain way. Everyone has their own perception of you, and you're scared it might taint their perception of you based on like how you're feeling. I know that was one of the things I struggled with, is that I thought if people knew what went inside like my brain and what I was feeling and what I was thinking, I was just embarrassed to share with everyone. They'd think I was crazy or that I'm just too emotional, because that was one of the things I got to growing up that also made it very hard for me to share these feelings with other people, was that I was called a crybaby, I was called oversensitive, I was called all these names that had these negative connotations, because I was full of emotion. I felt like I feel my emotions so deeply, and I've definitely worn my heart on my sleeve my entire life. So that was seen as a really awful thing to do when I was growing up, and I still think like I get a lot of shit for it. I've gotten shit for it. When I worked at Target, that was one of the things. They're like just too emotional, and yeah, so it made it hard, because I would convince myself I'm overreacting. Like, the way I'm feeling, I can't justify it. You know, so like if you can't justify it in your own head, like why are you gonna share it with someone, because you don't think they justify it either?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you don't. It's hard to empathize. It can be hard to empathize with someone's situation if you haven't. I would maybe not been through it, or yeah, it's a difficult thing to even process.
Well, the thing is, I think you can empathize with people even if you haven't been exactly what they've been through. But empathy is definitely a skill that not everyone has. Like, some people just aren't like, just don't feel it. Like, when you tell me like something that happened to you, like I may have not like gone through it, but I definitely can like feel like, I feel like I can feel your emotions, you know? Empathy is just not something that everyone has. I think it's a really great skill to be very empathetic. I think it makes you personally a great leader, a great friend, just a great person overall. But it is hard for some people to, I guess, to support other people, you know, to like be that listening board or sounding board.
Yeah, for someone to, yeah, no, for sure. And sometimes, often, if not most of the time, it's just to listen and not really, and again, not to really, it's more to listen than to actually respond when someone's like just going through it, you know, or whatever it is. Sometimes people aren't looking for advice. They just want to air their frustrations out, and they need someone just to listen.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to get into like how to support your friends who are struggling, and that's one of the key things is just listening. Because like, yeah, oftentimes we aren't looking for answers, and also I don't expect you to have the answers like to solve my problems. Sometimes they're greater than the both of us, so I didn't expect you to have the answers to fix everything, but it's nice to have someone to listen to you and to feel heard.
No, it is. Oftentimes it's better for, again, just to be like, oh, that person was able to, yeah, just to like listen. You're like, oh, that was nice. Sometimes we have our friends can often be our own therapists. Yeah. I've heard that somewhere. I forget where I heard that before, but I think it might have been from you, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the one thing too is like validating what they feel. You know, I think a lot of times when we share with others, we might feel like crazy, or that we have no reason to feel the way that we feel. So it's nice when someone validates like, oh, I completely understand why you might feel that way, or what's, you know, I would have the same reaction. Because yeah, it's just nice to know that you're not overreacting. Yeah, so it's just nice to have someone to validate like what you feel and not judge you. I think that's the one fear when you're opening up to someone, is that they're gonna have like some judgment for what you're feeling.
Yeah, I think it's a very human thing to do, but it's also key to understand that. Again, you should probably just, especially if you don't know the person very well, or maybe even if you do, it's probably best to try not to judge that person's situation, you know, like what it is that they're going through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. I think it's difficult too, because I feel like a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot of people are judgmental, but I think it's a kind of how like demonstrates like our humanity is like, we just have like, you see people and you think something, you know, you have some type of judgment of them in your head. Yeah, the other thing is but the other, like some other ways to help, I think, is like what I mentioned earlier, is just to check in. You really never know what's going on with someone, and you might take, I think a lot of people, if they do check in once, they'll take that as, oh, I did what I could. I asked her if she was okay. I didn't get an answer, and that's the end of it. But I think there's so much more we can do for people. It's like, obviously, if they're in that kind of dark place, they might not want to answer you, but continue to make your presence known. Continue to make them know that they're loved and that you care about them, and that, you know, you're there for them. And if they don't want to share, that's okay. Like, you're not going to take anything personal. And I think that was something I experienced when I was really going through it, is people took my absence and my silence as personal. They're like, well, you didn't answer. So, like, it made them mad. And it no longer became about me struggling. It became about how I made them feel when I was struggling.
Yeah. That's not the right way to approach that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I'm struggling here. And I feel guilty now because I've made someone feel a certain way with my actions. And I understand, like, I do have to take accountability for my actions, but in a situation where it's simply just that I'm not responding because I'm depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. It felt so kind of messed up that now I have to worry about someone being angry at me because, you know, I'm just in a dark place. So I think having that understanding that it's not personal, it's not about you. I think it's such a instinct we have to make things about us, you know? Like, oh, this person did this or they didn't respond, and that makes me upset.
Yeah, I've I don't know if I've ever done that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Where we tend to make things about, people can tend to make things about themselves somehow.
Yeah, I think it's just we have that instinct to make things completely about ourselves when they're just not about us. Especially if someone is sharing with you that they're going through a difficult time and that, like, you know, it just make sure you don't make it about yourself. I think people will be like, oh yeah, like, and start talking about me, but like maybe just listen and offer your input, like, oh man, I can completely understand, but just don't make the conversation about yourself. I think that's a mistake we make so often about these situations. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that happens. That's something I did not expect either, to be even a thing.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those flaws that we have as human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very self-centered, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, I think there needs to be more education around mental health. I feel as if a lot of people don't understand it still. What do you think?
I mean, what do you mean by that?
Like, they just don't understand the concept of, like, mental health and the different like, mental health disorders, such as, like, depression, anxiety, bipolar. I feel like there's not a understanding there often with people.
I mean, where would one have to learn about these things? Like, are you talking about, like, people need to be more informed about it in, like, elementary, kindergarten, middle school, high school? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, I don't care when you teach it, but I think it's something we need to talk about. That was something that, like, I never learned about growing up. And honestly, when I look back, I've struggled with anxiety my entire life, and I just thought it was normal. I thought this is the way people live. And then I became, like, more informed. As it got worse, I became more informed about it. And I wish someone would have told me sooner, because I could have had strategies to mitigate it sooner in life, you know? So I think it's something that we need to kind of educate people on. But even, like, in our instance, like, okay, we're adults. Like, we need to educate ourselves on it. I feel as though older generations kind of discredit the whole mental health thing.
I mean, I think it really does depend on who you're talking to, but yeah, that could be a possibility. It could be that there's certain generations that just don't think it's real, or whatever the case is. But yeah, no, I do agree with you that I think we do need to spend more, we as in obviously our individual selves, to learn about it more, but also to find those specific causes of, like, how it's become such a, or why it's become such a, I don't know, epidemic is the right word, because I feel like the more and more, or maybe it's just one of those things where the internet's made it the internet's made it more
talked about.
Not just talked about, but it's brought more light to it, to like situations or whatever it is. To whereas before, prior to the internet, you would only know about someone in your vicinity, you know, in your community that maybe was going through some sort of mental health.
Well, like 30 years ago, if someone like was in like a mental hospital, to be like, oh, that person's fucking crazy. The way we talked about
that's one thing, and I think that's one thing that is a great thing to bring up in this case is there was a lot more mental hospitals 30 years ago than there are now, and that's a really good thing to bring up and to wonder why local and federal governments are closing down mental hospitals. It's kind of weird.
It could also be due to like practices, unethical practices. The thing is the way that
I don't know.
The way that we treat mental health now is also a bit different. I would say that's probably why. I don't know for a fact. I can't say like, but also question. Like if 30 years ago, like the way that like I said, the way that they approach mental health is like if you had any like of those issues, like you were crazy, you know, because people were like, why can't they just handle their shit? Like I think that's how it was. Or even for instance, when I was in college, I was a part of the Hispanic Latino Student Union, and one of the events we did talk about like mental health in Hispanic households and how like a lot of Hispanic households didn't recognize that like, you know, mental health was important or that it was even existed, you know, because for instance, there's this idea of like, for instance, your parents, you know, they're from Mexico, right? And like they've obviously gone through like their own set of hardships, but that's just how life was. And they didn't recognize, like, if your mom had anxiety, it was like, your mom's a warrior, so I would guarantee that your mom has anxiety. They just dealt with it. They didn't see the need for, like, any other support. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, no, I remember we talked about this on a previous podcast.
Yeah, we did talk about this, yeah.
And again, I think it has to do more with a communal response to it. I have so many stories about that.
I think it's a lack of response to it.
No, I think there was a response to it. It was just, again, you're talking about a pueblo of people in rural Mexico. You know, at the time, there's probably around maybe 500 to 1,200 people who lived in this pueblo. And if someone was going through something, the community would respond. So if my mom knew how to speak English and I could get her on this podcast, that would be such a great way to see what she means by that. And what I heard, the stories that she told me about, was if someone was going through something, like the community would like respond in a positive way and not just banish them to like some, you know, black site off the grid where they're being locked up in an asylum. No, it was like, hey, like what's going on?
I don't think that's the case though with everyone.
I know it isn't. I'm just saying this is from like my mom's own experience, and I don't think we should again, it's anecdotal, right? I guess, but it's one of those things that they found a way again to respond in a positive way, not in a you're just insane or crazy. It was more of like, well, what's going on? Like, why is this going on? You know, if it was something to do with like a husband who was like being abusive, like that was brought clear in daylight. I mean, it was brought to everyone's attention of what was going on, and stuff like that. So, yeah. But yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from though in regards to, you know, like just this stigma around like someone saying that they're going through something. I also think that
there's kind of a downside to that too. Like it's great, like I guess in your mom's case, like it's great that there was like a community around it. But at the same time, I know like if I was going through something, I don't want everyone and their mother to know about that. You know, I want the people I've entrusted to speak to like keep that to themselves. And I think that's a problem that I faced too, is like everyone had their own idea of what was going on with me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like if I didn't want to share anything with anyone because I knew that at least if it was like some of my family, I knew that shit would go around, and then it becomes like the story becomes like kind of tainted too. Like it's not like what I actually shared, you know. So, in that case, I think it's just, yeah. I guess it's also knowing when to bring someone else in. Like, is this information that you need to share because this person is in danger, you know, because this person is gonna like harm themselves, or, you know, that's when you bring it to someone else, but not just like a random person, a professional.
No,
you know,
of
just
course.
tell your friend or whatever. But I also say it too, like when I mentioned like how households deal with it is, one of the many things that have caused me to be like very anxious and sometimes just becomes very overwhelming in this life is this pressure to just continuously do the right thing, and also like just sometimes even providing for yourself is stressful. Like, you know, I need a job to make money, to provide for myself, to have a roof over my head, to food to eat, and like just the concept of that in my mind sometimes would just be very stressful. And I realize that's something that we all have to do. But if I would explain that sometimes to, like, if I explain that to my dad, well, I love my dad, so I don't know that he'll listen to this anyway, but I do love my dad. But I think previously it might have gotten better now. He took it as like, well, that's just something we all have to do. So I don't know, like, why you're stressing about it, or like, you know, you just gotta like ignore it and keep moving on. And like my dad always took that approach of like, ignore the issue and just keep moving. Or as he says, lock it in a box, put it deep down, and just don't think about it. And that's just something I'm not physically capable of doing, at least not long term. Like I have definitely worked through some like chaotic times, but at some point you're gonna burst, you know? So I bring that up too because I think there is like an older generation who like maybe has struggled with their mental health. I don't doubt that they don't have their own mental health like battles, but versus like taking it for what it is and trying to like seek help, they just lock it in a box and just don't know it because like life goes on and life has to continue, you know? So those are things that I think have changed too, is the younger generations are kind of more open to realizing when like what they feel needs some type of help, you know, some type of like external help.
Yeah. They would, yeah, again, like you said, find some way to just not really bring it up. You know, they would just, just not bring it up.
But granted, like, I get it, I understand it too, because like times were really different, and you know, yeah, the times were just different, but it also impacts like the way our future generations work. Like, you know, everyone says that they want to be better than their parents were, give their children better than their parents have. And I think every generation says that. I want to be better than my parents were, because we can all see what we would have, like as an adult, we can see what we needed from our parents that we didn't know that we needed as a kid. So I feel like, yeah, it's just one of those things that each generation has realized. I wish my mom would have been more open with me about talking about like my feelings and not like just disregarding them. And this is not from experience, but like, you know, having this conversation, because like I said, like I was seen as a crybaby, and I did cry a lot, but it's because I felt all these things so deeply and I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. So
I wouldn't call them regulated. It's more like managing. What do you think?
I think those are synonyms, are they not?
No, because regulate would mean that someone has to do it for you, whereas managing is more on you doing it on your own.
I don't think regulate means someone has to do it for you.
Well, I guess depending on how you use it in a sentence, but
managing, I wasn't really good at managing my... I hate saying managing my emotions though too, because I don't want to feel like I need to like not show part of my emotions. I want to be able to be fully my present self, and when I'm sad, like show that I'm sad. If I'm angry, show that I'm angry. If I'm like, you know, I think our feelings are really important in our lives. I feel like I used to say this all the time, and I've said this to you so many times, is that, you know, everyone would like tell me how bad it was that I was so emotional, especially when I was working in like leadership positions. Like, you just gotta have thicker skin. And I'm like, part of my passion and my drive comes from the fact that I feel things so deeply. When I'm angry, or like someone has doubted me, oh, I might be angry about it, but I'm gonna freaking work 10 times harder. So like that emotion drives me. So the fact that like the idea of having to like not like, I get managing them, but it felt sometimes it felt like people just thought I shouldn't have any emotions. And sometimes I would question myself and think, man, I just wish I didn't feel anything at all.
I mean, I wouldn't approach it in that way. But I understand where some people do come from when they say that. And I think there's a better way to approach it than just to tell someone that they shouldn't feel what they're feeling. Because, again, whatever it is, again, they're going through something or you're going through something or whatever the case is. It's more on the how do you get to the next step or what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? Especially if you're in a work environment.
Yeah.
Instead of, let's, for example, say, like, what if that was holding you back from doing what you need to do, right? So that's one big question there that I know most employers look at, or even like just managers look at, is if it's holding you back, is it something that can be, is it something that's going to take like hours or days or weeks or?
But isn't that like, see, that's what stresses me out, right? Is like the idea that I have to be this person who can function despite my darkest days. Like that stresses me out to my core, because on my great days I'm capable. I can do anything that like I set my mind to. But on those dark days, it might hold me back from accomplishing the task at hand. But we can't be robots. We can't be immune to like what life throws at us. Like for instance, like we talked about how your uncle passed this weekend, and your mom went straight to Mexico because that's her brother. And like that's something that you wouldn't want to ignore that. That's a super important person in our life. And I feel like sometimes in the workplace we don't want people to have these, for one, we get bothered when life happens to other people because of the how it impacts other people. But at the end of the day, we're humans, and we deserve the time to feel our emotions, to like, and do the things that we need to do. Like for instance, like go be with your family when there's a tragic event, So I feel like, I just feel like I don't even know how we got to this conversation, but
I don't even know either. I just flowing. I think we're talking about how. We're talking about how in this example was like a rural community dealt with problems or solved problems.
Well, no, we were talking about I know we were talking about how like, you said something about like how is this gonna hold you back from doing what you want to do? And like that's the whole stress of it all. Is like I don't think anyone wants like what they're going through to hold them back from their full potential. But at sometimes we can't control those. Some days you wake up and you're having a shitty day, and what you can do is you can try to fix it, but at the same time we only have so much power. Or like something terrible happened to you that day, and the expectation that you're supposed to just operate at 100% all the time is not realistic. And I think that's what I like in the workplace. I feel like there's more companies like recognizing that like we aren't robots. Like you can't function at 100% all the time. And if you tell me you function at 100% all the time, you're lying. Like you're literally lying, because I don't think anyone can. But I think, and what bothers me too is like, now that we talk about mental health, is that some companies, I will say my company has done a great job of like bringing up mental health, especially this month, and talking about it and providing us resources. Like we actually have a resource, like if we need someone to talk to, and it's like available to our families. And I think that's so important. But other companies I think have done like just this like Band-Aid of like, you get one mental health day in addition to your pay time. Like, one day every year is gonna just fix all of my problems. So it seems silly that like some companies will have like these mental health initiatives, But I think if you talk to people who are actually struggling with their mental health, there might be some more actionable initiatives that you could have that would support the people that you employ, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here's one thing, Cesar, is that I feel like you don't really talk about your mental health often.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't.
He's
it's
like,
funny.
no, I don't.
You know what? I was actually going to bring this up towards the beginning of the podcast, but again, I'm not sure where the notes on this. I don't see any notes on the screen.
It's just they're just like notes. They're just like kind of like what we can talk to. But there's you can bring up.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring up that. It's not that this conversation makes me uncomfortable. It's more of like
but it's that this conversation
every time we talk about like anxiety, depression, mental health, all these other things, it's just like I don't know how I can add value because I wish I did know more about these subjects. Like I wish we could bring on a psychologist or something like that could add more insight to this. I just feel like, I feel like whenever I like to talk about something on this podcast, it's like, oh, I can, this is where I can add value to it. Because I just don't know.
You don't think you struggle at all with?
No, I know I do. I think everyone does, to some extent. It's just some of us tend to not. Like it's like a taboo. Obviously, you can talk about whatever you want. It's more of, I guess there's a right. I guess at least in my perspective, in my head, it's like there's a right time and place for every conversation. And in this case, like if it was something that I was going through, I would actually want to go and talk to a certified specialist. In this case, right? I would go and search for someone that
you wouldn't talk to me about it.
No, I would. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm just saying in this sense, we're on a podcast. It's going on YouTube. If people are actually watching up to this point, we're like, what?
You don't think
but
you don't think the vulnerability of seeing someone else go through something and talk about it is helpful?
No, I think it is. I've seen all sorts of different professionals who are in that space.
But you don't have to be a professional to talk about what you've gone through to help someone.
No, but I'm not saying that at all either. All I'm saying is that for me, again, we're all going through our own journey, right? We all have our own personal journey when it comes to, in this case, right, mental health. Is that for me, I'm not there yet. That's the best way to. That's the best way to answer that.
You're not there to share like what you feel. It's basically what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that either.
But you just said you're not there yet.
Nor am I insinuating that. I'm just saying that I'm not there yet in regards to talking about those or any specific issue regarding my own personal mental health journey, if you want to call it that.
But that's exactly what you just said. You're not ready to share.
It's not that I'm not ready to share. It's just that I don't know how to bring it up in a podcast format to where it can be beneficial for those listening. Because I feel like I'm just gonna ramble.
And I get that.
To me, it's like rambling. Like if you want me to ramble, I will ramble for hours.
I understand. But what I'm saying is that a lot of times we think that like we don't. What we have to say, even if it's like a rambling, won't bring value to someone else. But what I'm saying, and like you don't have, I'm not saying you have to share, but what I'm saying is that sometimes just hearing someone else's like what they've gone through and like their journey, even if you're not providing any actual steps, it can make you feel like you're not like in it alone. Like, you know, like it I think especially from like where I would see it like from like a male's perspective, like men are less likely, I would believe, to share those like intimate feelings or that they're struggling. Typically because I guess, you know, there's that stigma too of being a man and having emotions. But I think it's helpful to see, like if there were men watching this podcast, I'm not sure that many men watch this podcast, but for you to be vulnerable in that way, even just the vulnerability can be helpful. That's all I was saying. And I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit for like just sharing what we've been through, even if it's not going to be like, hey, you should do this, can just make someone else feel better, just knowing that they're not alone.
Yeah, no, I can see the value in it. It's just we can have a whole segment called Cesar's Rambles, because I can ramble on about mental health and all these other things and what I think about it, what I think could be beneficial for society, what I think could be beneficial for you, for me, for anyone else listening, but I just don't it would have to be its own thing, or else it would just be me and you rambling about for like 45 minutes, and or more, I guess, right? About whatever it is, right? And there may not be like some solution towards the end of that ramble because we're just talking about it. We're not actually.
But I think the most important thing is that we do talk about it. Like that's the whole point, is like that we need to talk about it. There needs to be more people that like say like, like, I think one of the most like, I think it's helpful to hear people talk about it, especially like people, for instance, that you look up to, or like in like an environment for work. It might be nice to know your manager has also been through something. Like I think it connects people.
Oh no, it does for sure.
I think that's important, and the first step to that is talking about it. But I will say, given that Cesar won't share anything about his mental health, is that Cesar has been, like, I feel like through the ringer with me and like dealing with me.
There's that too. Yeah, I mean, there's all of that too. I mean, there's a lot. Right? Yeah. It's yeah.
Okay, so here's a question then that you probably can't answer. Is like, what do you think, when I was struggling, what do you think, how did you approach it? What were you thinking when I was like struggling? And
I mean, when, I guess, because it's
all the day,
I mean, I feel like
day.
When,
No, like, I mean like 2 years ago, like you.
I honestly didn't know what to do. I was trying to approach things with what I thought I could do. I do wish that looking back at it now, I do wish there was a way I could have gotten you more professional help, but I didn't have the money for it. Yeah. Because again, I was just trying to be there for you at that point. Yeah. Because there's a lot going on. So yeah, I was just trying to be there, I guess. I wasn't trying to not be there, because that would have been the easy way out, quote unquote, right? Easy way out. It's just to be like, okay, see you later. Like, this is not working out.
I think about this because I just read this book, and it's called If He Had Been With Me.
Oh yeah.
And in the book, like, this girl is dating this guy, and he ends up like towards like the end-ish part of the book, he breaks up with her because she's depressed and she's too much to handle. And I think oftentimes too, I know that I felt like that. I was like, oh, Cesar's gonna leave because I can't handle myself and he can't handle it. And that was like a fear I had, was that like our relationship was gonna be over because of the like how depressed I was.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common I don't know how common it is, but I would say it's an easy way out, for people. I mean, they would say, oh, I'm leaving you because I love you and I hope you find, the best, some support system to help you out, but I can't be in this situation. That's like a very common thing. Or there's even crazy stories of like, maybe not mental health related, but like it's a part of your well-being, is like people, again, leaving someone because they couldn't deal with their physical health. Like, I heard a story about this.
That's so messed up.
No, I heard a story. I don't know if you heard this one, of this girl who ran a marathon for her ex who had cancer. And she said, I'm running a marathon for him. But she left him because he had cancer. And I was like, what? Like, wait, what? So and they were like married, and she couldn't deal with his cancer. And that was such I guess that's like gaslighting to like the.
It's awful. I mean, I personally, everyone has their own reasons for things, so I don't want to judge in that situation.
But the same way, I wouldn't.
It's easy to be in a relationship with someone or married to someone when things are good. I think it shows a true test of like how much you love someone by how you react to the situations that life brings, like cancer or like even mental health.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Is that, yeah, I mean, it's I feel like whenever I tell people about me and our relationship, I honestly feel like we've been through the thick of it, and that it's helped our relationship because like we've made it through the times that like a lot of relationships might have not, or like, we've made it, we stuck by each other's side when things were shitty, through like lost jobs, through depression, through all of it.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of times it kind of shows when like things happen, how like people react. You kind of figure out who your friends are and who really loves you, like who's going to show you love when you're not the perfect version of yourself or when you need more support. And I think that's a difficult thing to go through, is to me, like when I was going through everything, I was the ugliest version of myself. I knew that like I wasn't being the person I wanted to be. Some of the actions that I had might have hurt people by me not reaching out to them, and like so I had all these things to think about, how like this is the ugliest version of myself. And when you show that like ugliest version of yourself, you do find out that not everyone's willing to stick by your side through that. And so while it feels awful at the time, you feel alone and you feel like, well, I don't have anyone truly by me, you do find out who will stick by you in those times. I knew that you obviously were a keeper because you stuck by me when not a lot of people would. And like you were there for me. You know, if I needed you, you'd stay home. And I think that's a beautiful thing that comes out of the struggle, is that while you might not have as many people as you wanted in your life, you do have the people that value you no matter what version of yourself that you are. And I think I wish more people, and it's hard. It's really hard, and I need to do a better job of it too with my friends, but just loving people not just in their season, but like every version of them. Because we all have like skeletons in our closet. We all have these like ugly things that we do. Like I know I anger way too quickly. But Cesar loves me despite. He still fills up the Brita. He does the things even if like, you know, yesterday I was really such a bad mood after we got back from the movies, because like I wanted to clean the apartment, and like I lost my phone for like 30 minutes while I was cleaning the apartment, and threw something and I threw it in the washer because I'm like crazy. And Cesar, like, I don't remember, but I was telling him like do something, and I was getting angry, and there was really no reason to be angry, but like Cesar always will come up to me like after I've had my little anger bout. He'd be like, I forgive you, you know? And I'm like, but it makes me smile because he just goes, I forgive you. And I'm like, damn it. But I think it's a beautiful thing too, is be able to offer that forgiveness. Like, even though like you didn't deserve for me to be angry at you, like you offered the forgiveness, like just like, here, yeah, I forgive you, Sonny. And that's a good thing, and I think more people should be like that.
No, it's funny that you bring that up though, because I feel like that's something that, you know, we all go through things in our own lives, and sometimes even if we don't have someone that can tell us that they forgive us, that forgiveness is always freely available.
Yeah.
You know, and it's free. It's there for us to receive whether we want it or not.
And it's free to give.
Yeah.
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 That's something I'm working on, is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so many. Mental health is its own thing. There's so many different conversations that we can have around it, but I think having people to support you when you're really not yourself. I feel like when you're going through when you're battling depression, you're battling anxiety, you're yourself in a way, but you're not like yourself. And it's really difficult. So I really want people out there to feel supported, or like to know that they are supported. And if you know someone that's struggling, like, don't stop reaching out. Keep reaching out. Even if you don't get an answer, just always reach out. Always provide a ear to listen. Always provide a way to validate how they feel. Don't make them feel crappy for how they feel. Like, I think one of the things, last things too, is I felt as though people wanted to fix me. Like, obviously I didn't want to be this like depressed version of myself, especially because people were like, oh, you're so happy, like what happened, like why are you so sad? And so I didn't want to be that version of myself, but I also hated the idea that there was a part of me that needed to be fixed. That, like, I couldn't be loved unless I fixed this part of myself. Because this version of myself apparently wasn't worthy of love. And so I hate that too. Well, you can't, like, so I think that what you can do is offer, like, if they want resources, offer them, like, you know, help them find, like, professional resources, for instance. But also love them even if they choose not to get help. Love them if they just want to, just love them love them because that's what you should do. You should love them for who they are, no matter where they are in their life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's pretty important to me. But do you have any last thoughts?
No, but I think that I would say that, again, this is like one of those steps that I have to personally take in order to be more open about, be more vulnerable, I guess, right?
Vulnerability.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right?
I mean, it's hard. Like, I feel like this whole conversation is, like, not contradicting, but it is hard to be vulnerable. Like I said, there's a lot of shame and embarrassment that I personally felt when I was going through, like, I can't say these words out loud. I was like, I'm ashamed of them. I'm embarrassed of them. I couldn't possibly let someone else know what I'm going through, or yeah. So I think that's one of the harder steps to take, is to, one, acknowledge, like, how you feel, and then two, like, one, share it. But then also, obviously, to share it on a podcast is even more, like, depending on who sees this.
Yeah.
It is hard, but I like to think that it gives someone insight into, like, you know, who I am as a person, and maybe why I am the way that I am. Not to say that I can't grow, because this podcast is all about growth, and I hope to be ever changing. I think it's important, and we all go through these kind of steps at different times, you know. I think one day, I think that was a conversation me and Cesar had a lot. It was like, I felt like he didn't share his emotions. I'm like, just tell me how you're feeling. I was like, I just want to know because I want to help. Or like, and so, like, I think, yeah, everyone's different. So, you know, but if you do share, I think it would be helpful to other people.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe one day down the line we'll hear Cesar's story. But yeah, that has been today's episode. I was so glad to talk about this, especially with mental health is so important. If you're struggling, please reach out to someone. If you don't feel like you can reach out, just know that there are people there that love you and appreciate you, and maybe just don't know how to support you. And hopefully they'll listen to this podcast too and be like, man, I need to support my friends a little bit better. But I really wanted to talk about this because it's something that's very near and dear to my heart, because I've gone through it. I mean, I'm still going through it. I'm not cured, but talking about it has helped me kind of, one, better understand myself, and also acknowledge that I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of people, you know, going through it, and they might have not been through the same thing that you have, but I think it kind of builds connection. I think connection and community are also important in all of this. So, yeah, that's been today's episode. If you've made it to the end of the episode, please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and give us a like. Comment how you support your friends, or how you want your friends to support you, and, you know, then we can kind of maybe compile like a little how to support your friends guide.
Yeah.
And if you're watching or listening on any other podcasting platforms like Apple or Spotify, please rate our podcast. It really, really does help. And I want to know what you think. I want to know what you want to hear from us. So, yeah, please do that. We appreciate it a lot. We want to continue to grow, and part of that is growing this podcast so people can hear it around the world. That's really would be my goal. I would be so happy to get this podcast in front of more people and be able to also bring on some really cool guests. So that has been Growing Together with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We'll see you guys again next week.
See you guys later.